first thing I had to do was lay out some offcuts. That part was easy. Did some sketching beforehand, and this design was not matching. One of the important parts for me was to have a big, square, central block. So, against my better judgment, I measured it out. After that, I got it in my vise and I started sawing. I had sawed this wood once before for a mallet that I made with a friend, and back then it was incredibly difficult to cut, but this time the saw was just flying through. So that was an incredible feeling of progress, and that's always a good thing. Sometimes it could get lonely working on these projects, so I had to take a second and make myself a friend. Now that central block is definitely perfectly square, I could start laying out the rest of the design. This is by no means a final layout, I just want to get a feel for things. The first reason you should make bad art is that if you expect all your art to be good, you'll probably run into a situation where you never start anything. Ideas can exist in a sort of perfect way inside of our heads, and it's only once you start to act upon it that you confront your own limitations and your abilities. For better or for worse, that original idea is going to change along the way. So by starting something, you kind of always have to kill the original idea. Not all good ideas lead to good art, and that's okay. It's at this point that I remembered I'm not very good at planning, so I thought I'd just cut up a bunch of wood and I'll figure it out after, I'm sure. Now that I've got a ton of material to work with, I want to start making some more interesting pieces. So I'm going to grab some of these smaller pieces and I'm going to start gluing them together, but before I do that, I just want to test things out, so I'm grabbing them and I'm just stacking them up basically. The second reason you should make bad art is so you can explore new ideas. If you expect your art to be good, you're going to be a lot less likely to experiment and try new things. So for this piece, I want to experiment with the idea of asymmetrical symmetry, which is why that big central block was so important to me. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to have all these different colors and textures and materials going on in this piece. And I want to try to arrange it in a certain way so that the top and the bottom and the left and the right all look balanced around that central piece without having any actual symmetry. Just like you, I watch a lot of crafting YouTube videos, and one thing I don't see shown a lot is just how messy this hobby is. So while that glue's drying, I'm taking the opportunity to clean up my workstation because it was getting a little out of control. This might be crazy, but I feel a little guilty for vacuuming up this sawdust. Maybe I should save that. I could use that for something. Way too small. This piece is a submission to a gallery exhibition, and one of the requirements for that exhibition is that it's under 12 inches by 12 inches. So I'm just cutting out a piece of foam board to that size so I have something to measure against. At this point, you might be a little tired of watching me do layouts, so... Oh, saw that in a video, I thought it would work. Okay, well it's probably better I do it by hand. The third reason you should make bad art is that even if you don't end up liking the finished product or you give up on a project, there's probably going to be one or two moments during the process that you really do find something that you like. And this was the moment for me. I love the way all the different colors and textures look in this, and I would definitely incorporate some of those ideas into another piece in the future. In fact, I will, for sure. Needed to make a couple last minute glue jobs. Don't say glue job. At this point, I had a pretty important decision to make, which is what wire colors I'm going to use for this. So, as usual, I was just holding different things up to the model to see what's going to look right. I think that copper looks right, and it's also a salvaged material, which, always tickles my fancy. So I'm just marking out where the wires are going to come out from that central block. And here too, I'm thinking about asymmetrical symmetry and not having it come out from the same place on every side. Here I'm drilling some holes with the drill bit that's a little too big for the wire that I'm going to use, but I don't know that at this point, so I'm feeling pretty happy. And I'm feeling pretty happy because I don't have to be precise with this. This is not going to thread all the way through, so I could kind of just get a hole in there. I got stuck only once for a minute or two, but then we were back off to the races and the rest of this went really smooth. This is the part of the project that I think might look like absolute madness to most people, but what I'm doing is I'm just laying out wires, and while I'm doing that, I'm thinking about how they're going to thread through these blocks. So they're not all going to be on top like this. Some are going to go inside, some are going to go over top, and some are going to go underneath. And I'm thinking about that in my mind, but I realize this is looking more and more like a big pile of junk. That being said, and even though my confidence had started to wane by this point, I took it off camera because I wanted to try out a few things. And I'm really glad I stuck with it for a little while longer, because the weaving pattern on this block here is another one of those things I'll be taking with me. Here I'm using some painter's tape to try to solve the problem that will ultimately become this project's downfall. The problem is that these wires are not sturdy enough to stop the pieces from moving around while I'm trying to work. I also started to have a growing suspicion that the wires would not be strong enough to keep the piece together once it was finished. That leads us to reason number 4 that you should make bad art, which is that you're never going to find out what doesn't work unless you get in there and give it a go. Over time, you get a little bit better at knowing when things are not going to work out and cutting your losses. That being said, I was still convinced I could fix this problem, so I took everything off, and then I used a paint marker to label and mark out where all the pieces live so I don't keep losing my layout. This is another one of those things I'll be taking with me to future projects, because as much as I don't like to plan, it's helpful, I'll admit it. I then turned on all my oranges lights and started to actually thread some of those wires through the blocks. At this point, I explained to my wife the problems I was having with this project, and she asked me a really important question. She asked me, "Is it still giving you joy?" To which I had to respond, "No." So here's the final reason you should make bad art. Taking risks, especially when it doesn't pay off, helps you develop your artistic voice. I probably could have fixed the problems with this piece and seen it through. Ultimately though, I don't think this type of abstract design is something that resonates with me. I'm much more drawn to creating characters and worlds. So I'm going to take these lessons and take these offcuts and meet you in the next video where I will do exactly that. Thanks for watching.